my name is TJ. I am one of the pastors at BICF, and it is my joy and privilege to get to share with you today about the act of giving. We're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 16 today, verses 1 and 2. One of the things I love about 1 Corinthians is that chapter 15 is the perfect ending to the book. It's the glorious resurrection of Jesus Christ. But the book doesn't end there. It goes to chapter 16 to talk about some practical matters of the church and the implications of the resurrection on our life. And one of those practical matters that it talks about is the act of giving. Listen to the text. Now, concerning the collection of the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come. I wonder, did you notice what the text just said? It says, as I directed in the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do. This message of giving isn't just for the people that lived in Corinth. It's not just for the church of Galatia. It says the churches of Galatia. This is a message that God has given to the churches. That means it's a message for you and a message for me today. Some practical principles from giving from this text would be, number one, we're to give regularly. Look at verse 2. On the first day of every week. Now that's kind of interesting, don't you think? Why did Paul say on the first day of every week? I mean, he has 7 days to choose from. Why not Tuesday? Why not Thursday? Why not Friday? Why does it have to be the first day of every week? And I think the reason Paul says the first day of every week is because the first day of the week, Sunday, the day of the resurrection of Jesus, is the day that the church centers itself as a body. We come together for corporate worship. And what Paul is wanting to do here is he's wanting to remind you that giving is an act of worship. And worship must be regular. It's not something you do once a year. Do you really believe that it's more blessed to give than to receive? Then you want to be a regular giver. Can you imagine if you took your spiritual life and said, I'm just going to do it once a year. Let's say singing, for example. I'm going to calculate all of the songs that we're going to sing in 2022 at our church. And I'm just going to take all of those songs. I'm going to skip church for a year. And I'm just going to have this one big worship service where I sing all the songs at one time. Well, if you did that, you would really miss the point of corporate singing. It's that regular weekly rhythm of coming together and singing together that is calibrating your heart to Jesus. And the same is true in giving. It's not a once a year event. It's a regular weekly event centered on the worship of God as the people of God gather together that is calibrating our heart back to Jesus. Because I imagine all of us feel that tug towards the things of this world. We feel that tug to spend our money on the temporary, to not store up treasures in heaven, but to store up treasures on earth that moth can destroy, that thieves can break in and steal. And so Paul is reminding us this regular act of giving is you taking your heart and planting it in the soil of Jesus Christ and saying, bloom for me a heart that is in love with the kingdom of God more than the kingdom of this world. And if you want your heart to move towards the kingdom, then give regularly as an act of worship. Secondly, giving should be universal. In other words, it is an act that all Christians are commanded and called to do. Again, look at the text. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up. Who's to give? Everyone. Each of you. Are you rich? You're called to give. Are you poor? You're called to give. Are you a new Christian? You're called to give. Are you a mature Christian who's been a Christian for 50 years? You too are called to give. Are you debt-free? You're called to give. Are you in debt? You too are called to give. Do you have a mortgage? Do you have college loans that you have to pay? You're called to give. Are you in retirement? You too are called to give. Are you a college student without a job? You're called to give. Or do you have a family with family responsibilities and you're worrying about where the next paycheck's going to come from? Well, guess what? Even you are called to give. The church at Corinth had all types of people, rich and poor, Jews and Gentiles, and Paul doesn't make an exception for any one of them. He says each of you should set aside something every week. Thirdly, our giving should be strategic. Look at the verse again. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up. Why do you think Paul says put something aside? Why do you think he says store it up? Because he knows the human heart. He knows how life really is. And he knows that if you wait to give till the end of the week, that at the end of the week, you'll reach into your pockets to give to God, and you'll find that those pockets are empty. You've already spent it on something else. So he's saying, be strategic, set it aside, store it up so that there's something to give at the end of the week. If you don't plan for giving, then giving will not happen. You'll wake up and you'll be like, where did it all go? And you won't know, and there's nothing else left to give to God. So we're called to be good stewards for God and strategic with the money that God has given us. I've been really challenged by John Wesley's strategy for giving. He says, gain all you can, or earn all you can, save all you can, so that you can give all you can. And I think that's a very simple but an effective strategy for giving. We have to be good stewards, which means we must work and earn money. You can't set aside something that you don't have. So work hard so that you have something to give. But just because you have money doesn't mean that you're actually giving money. So he says, earn all you can and save all you can. So this is that dreaded B word that we don't like to talk about. This is budgeting. We've got to create a budget and put giving in that budget, that we set it aside, that we store it up, that we are intentional with how we spend our money in this world, that it's not all going back to us, but that we're blessed to be a blessing. And then just because we make money and just because we've stored up money, that doesn't mean that we're actually giving money. There's a lot of people that have stored it up for their own selfish pleasures and they've not given to anybody. So we have to be intentional about taking that grip off of our money and letting go of it. We earn all we can. We save all we can so that we can give all that we can. You know, Paul was very intentional about this strategy. He said, I don't want you to give when I come. I don't want to show up and say, here's a need, so I want you to give to it. That's what he says, verse 2, so that there will be no collecting when I come. Why does he say that? Because he knows if he just shows up and says, here's a need in Jerusalem, some people will be able to give and some people won't be able to give. So he shares with them the need beforehand. And he says, you've got time between now and when I arrive to start weekly storing things up. And when I come, everybody will be able to participate in the act of worship through giving. And that's true for all of us. Every one of us can participate in giving if we're strategic in our giving. Fourthly, our giving should be proportionate. Proportionate to how God has blessed us, proportionate to the season of finances that we are in. Again, listen to the text. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up as he may prosper. Now, I'm going to say something that might shock you. Paul does not prescribe a tithe right here. Actually, when you read the New Testament, it almost never speaks of the tithe. Jesus speaks of a tithe twice, but that's in reference to the Pharisees when he condemns them. Well, you tithe mint and dill, but you neglect the weightier matters of the law. Paul never uses the word tithe. Hebrew uses it once when it's connecting Jesus to the greater Melchizedek. The Old Testament talks a lot about it, but it seems to have disappeared in the New Testament. But the New Testament does talk a lot about giving. And as one pastor remarked, everything is greater with Christ, the fulfillment of the New Testament. He says, we have greater promises. We have a greater covenant. There's a greater sacrifice in the New Testament with Jesus. Why wouldn't there be greater giving with Jesus as well? I think for the most of us, a tithe is a good place to start, but we probably are wanting or needing to go beyond a tithe, beyond 10%. You know, a tithe, if that's your heart to say, well, I'm just going to stop at a tithe, I'm never going to give any more than 10%, that's a heart that says, well, God gets 10 and I get 90. But the Christian says, God gets it all. God, I don't own anything. I'm just a steward of what God has given me. That's the principle here in giving, that you set something aside as you may prosper. How has God prospered you? That's the proportion to which you give. Again, I love John Wesley in the matter of giving. He's been very influential in my life in giving. He tells a story of how he just returned home from buying some pictures to hang on his wall, when there's a knock at the door, and he opens the door and it's the housekeeper, and he sees it's winter and she doesn't have a coat warm enough to keep her from freezing in the winter. So he reaches into his pocket to give her some money because he's moved with compassion. But he realizes that he doesn't have any money. He'd spent it all on the photos. And he asked himself, will my master say, well done, good and faithful steward? You've adorned your walls with money that might have screened this poor creature from the cold. O justice, O mercy, are not these pictures the blood of this poor maid? And this incident transformed how he saw money. That it wasn't a resource for him only, but it was a resource for God to bless other people. And so he lived not with the principle of a tithe, but he lived with the principle of, I want to earn as much as I can and save as much as I can so that I can give as much as I can. So what did his life look like? Well, one year he recorded that he had earned 30 pounds. His living expense was 28 pounds. So he gave away 2 pounds in proportion to what he could give as he may prosper. The next year, he earned double that, and he still lived off of 28 pounds. So he gave away 32 pounds. The next year, he earned 90 pounds. Again, lived off of 28 pounds. So he gave away 62 pounds as he may prosper. God had prospered him. Next, he says, I made 120 pounds. But I still only need to live off of 28 pounds. So he gave away 92 pounds as he may prosper. And then one year he made over 1,400 pounds, but he only lived off of 30 pounds and he gave the rest away as he may prosper. That's what God is calling us to. Not to be stuck to a number, but to say, what has God given me in this season? And what can I give away for the glory of God as an act of worship? May you be blessed as you worship God through your giving.